الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Continuing with our reading of the great book of Qadi Iyad, the book of Shifa, we begin where we left off. قال المصنف رحمه الله ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين. So Qadi Iyad, he says رحمه الله, may Allah have mercy on him, may we benefit from his knowledge in this world and in the next. Ameen. Section 3, the meaning of miracles, mu'jizat. Remember the last class we began talking about this concept of the miracles. So what Qadi Iyad is going to do basically for the next, let's say, page or two, is he is going to explain our methodology, our scholarly methodology for how we accept the different traditions related to the miracles of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So he says, rahimahullah, know that the reason we call what the prophets have brought a miracle, mu'jiza, is that creatures are incapable, i'jaz, of doing the like of it. So the word mu'jiza in Arabic related to that is i'jaz, which is to be incapable. Ajiza an shay, to be incapable of doing something. So the reason we use this word for miracle in the Arabic language is that the miracle is a challenge. When a prophet comes with a miracle, this is a challenge to those people to do something like what the Prophet did, which obviously they can't, so it's a challenge. Like the sorcerers with Moses, Moses's miracle is a challenge that the sorcerers or the magicians couldn't imitate. So in the English language, when we say miracle, I forgot to look up the etymology of miracle, but it doesn't connote the same concept as challenge. It's more of something that is extraordinary, which is probably why people in the West tend to not believe in miracles, because people are very material and things like that. But if you understand that the miracle is a challenge, then you understand that there are many miracles around us. The creation of the heaven and the earth is a miracle. The fact that the Quran is unchanged over time is a miracle. It's a challenge. There's no document that we have that's not unchanged. If you think about it, the greatest documents of Western literature or Western philosophy or Western thought, whether it be something like the Magna Carta or whether it be our founding documents or whether it be the epic poems of the ancient world, the poems of Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, or the epic poem of Gilgamesh, or the plays of Shakespeare, on and on the list. And Shakespeare was, in the span of human history, it was like the day before yesterday. It was in the 1500s, that's just like yesterday. Even those things are not preserved the way that the Quran has been preserved. So if you understand that a miracle is a challenge, it will help you broaden your understanding of what a miracle is. There are two sorts of miracle. One sort is something that human beings are potentially able to do, but which they are prevented from doing by an act of Allah in order that the truthfulness of His Prophet should be confirmed. These include such things as turning away from seeking death when they were asked to do so, and their incapacity to bring the like of the Quran and similar things. So some of the miracles, it is within the human capacity to do it. A human being could formulate words like the Quran, but still they can't. That's the point. So it's even more miraculous because it seems, yeah, I can do that. I have no problem. I can do that. And then you try and then you can't. The other sort is things that are beyond. The other sort are things that are beyond our power meaning, and which they cannot do, such as bring the dead to life. Do you know anyone that can bring the dead to life? No. Maybe you can with your medical skills, but for most people we can't. That would be a turn of your practice, right? If you could start advertising. Washingtonian best doctors, brought the dead to life. Okay. Turning a staff into a snake, right? No one could do that. We just talked about Moses, alayhi salam. Bringing the she-camel out of the rock, a rock formation, and then an animal comes out of it. the tree speaking, the water flowing from between the fingers and splitting the moon, so on and so forth. So no human can do these things. So the first type of miracles are things that we can do, maybe, but they're done in a way that's a challenge. No one can do them. And then the second type of miracles are things that are just so out of the ordinary that no one can do them. And usually in the modern world, it's the second kind that people think about miracles. But I don't want us to forget the first type of miracles, because in many respects, they're even more powerful. I mean, if Christ brought the dead back to life, I mean, that's, unbelievable. But then they'll say, okay, this is some super magic or something like that. The real miracle is when you do something that other people technically can do, but there's no way that they can do it even when they try. That's a longer lasting miracle. So the greatest miracle of the Prophet ﷺ is the Quran itself. Okay, the second type, he says, they are things that Allah does at the hand of His prophets. The Prophet's challenge to those who denied Him to produce something similar was in order to show their incapacity. Know that the miracles which appeared at the hand of our Prophet ﷺ, the proofs of his prophethood and the indications of his truthfulness, are made up of both types. So Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ had both types of those miracles. Whereas other prophets in the past maybe had one or another, but our Prophet ﷺ, we argue, was given the most miracles, more than all of the other ones before him. He is the messenger with the most miracles, the one with the clearest sign and most manifest proof, as we will make clear. Due to their great quantity, his miracles cannot be numbered. So there are some ulama that try to write books to enumerate the miracles of the Prophet ﷺ, but they number in over 1,000, because when you get down to it, almost everything that he did was miraculous. The number of subsidiary miracles contained by just one of them, the Quran, cannot be counted. So one of our beliefs of the Quran is that the Quran is a continual miracle, and that the Quran in a way contains an infinite amount of miracles because of the way that the language is brought together. لا ينتهي عجائبه is how we refer to it, that its wonders never cease. So the Quran is a living miracle, it's a continual miracle, it continues to guide, we continue to apply it, we continue to draw new meanings from it, even meanings that maybe people in the Salaf didn't have. And that's a sign that it's a living miracle that we continue to draw from. There are literally thousands of them, which is shown by the fact that the Prophet ﷺ issued the challenge to bring a surah from the Quran. Allah says, فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِثْلِهَا, bring one surah, one chapter like this Quran. And none of the people of knowledge were able to do so, not even the extent of the shortest surah, Surah Al-Kawthar, Inna A'tainaka Al-Kawthar, the smallest surah. Even that people couldn't imitate, even though some of the pagan Arabs tried. Every single verse is therefore a miracle, and it also has other miraculous properties, as we will explain further on. The miracles of the Quran is its own subject. And there are independent books that have been written about that by other, As-Sakhawi, not As-Sakhawi, Az-Zarkashi, As-Suyuti. Others, they have independent books that talk about the miraculous nature of the Quran. From, people talk about the scientific things that are in the Quran, people talk about the linguistic miracles of the Quran. People talk about some of the unique features. I think he'll mention some of them. It's its own subject. And usually in Ramadan, I don't know about Imam Rifai, but those are the books that we pull off our shelf when we have to prepare for our Taraweeh Khatira. Those are the books we turn to. The miracles of the Prophet fall into both categories, two categories. One category is of those that are well known and have been transmitted to us through many channels, like the Quran. So here, this is the methodology. So the next page, he's going to give you the methodology of how we accept information. So the first thing he said, and I talked about this in the last class for those that remember. Let me just repeat that. One category of the miracles is of those that are well known and have been transmitted to us through many channels, like the Quran. That's not a very good translation, because Qadi Iyad is using technical language, that the Quran, anything that we have in Islam comes to us, our primary sources come to us through transmission, meaning one person narrates it to another person. Obviously, it's not that simple, because maybe multiple people heard or multiple people saw the same action. Last class we talked about multiple people narrating an act or a piece of information to multiple people, and those multiple people narrate it to multiple people. We call that tawatur. It's a technical term that Dr. Sherman Jackson translates as diffuse congruence, which probably doesn't mean anything to anyone, but because we grew up hearing that term, we know that that's what tawatur is, which means that so many people communicated it to so many people that it is statistically impossible that all of these people gather together, conspire together to lie. That is the technical definition of tawatur transmission. Every single verse in the Quran is narrated through tawatur. That is the highest form of transmission that we have in our sciences. And there is a cluster of hadith that are also transmitted through tawatur. And the tawatur transmission brings to us certainty. So we are certain that the incident happened. We are certain that the transmission is accurate. And therefore we have a level of yaqeen. Anything less than that is going to be a less level of transmission. So he's saying some of the stories related to the miracles of the Prophet ﷺ have come to us through that way, through that transmission. And we cannot deny something that has come to us through that type of transmission. It's like the equivalent of us denying a verse of the Quran. There is no doubt or dispute that the Prophet ﷺ brought it and it appeared from him and that he used it as a proof. If some pig-headed denier rejects this, it is like denying the fact that Muhammad ﷺ existed in this world. The deniers themselves are refuted by the very existence of the Quran itself. It in itself and all of the miracles that it contains are therefore indisputable. The fact of the inimitability is also both indisputable and verified by investigation, as we will demonstrate. So somebody who denies this type of transmission is like the equivalent of somebody saying there is no historic figure called Prophet Muhammad. I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, even non-Muslim historians talked about him. So that's a fact. It's just a historical fact. So we wouldn't believe or give credence to anybody who says something like that. That's what the tawatur transmission, that's the level of trust that we have in it. One of our imams stated this principle applies generally to the signs and the breaking of norms that occurred at the hands of the Prophet ﷺ, for if no single one of them on its own is absolutely fixed and decisive, all of them together reach the level of indisputability. So even if some of the stories of the miracles, individual stories, are not at that level of transmission, you put all of those stories together and then it makes sense, is what he's saying. They each strengthen each other. And that's part of also how we weigh transmission or pieces of information that come to us. There is no doubt these extraordinary things occurred at his hands, and neither believer nor unbeliever dispute their occurrence. What the obstinate do dispute is that they were from Allah. So the people of Mecca, the Quraysh, none of them denied what they saw, but they just denied that this was a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rather they said, oh, you're a sorcerer, you're a magician, you're crazy, you're insane, something like that. But they didn't deny the things that they saw. Just like the magicians of Moses didn't deny what Pharaoh didn't even deny what he saw. He just denied that this came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have already stated that they were from Allah Almighty and that this is the confirmation of His words, you have been truthful. It is well known that these sort of things happened in the case of our Prophet ﷺ, just as it indisputably follows that Hatim was generous. Hatim is somebody from the pre-Islamic time who was known as a generous person. That Antara was brave, he was a brave soldier at the time of the Jahiliyyah. And that Al-Ahnaf was forbearing. So these are stories that he's giving from the pre-Islamic Arabs. So there were some pre-Islamic history, and these were, luminary figures that were examples of bravery or chivalry or courage or generosity, etc. So he's saying nobody denies these historic figures. We all believe in them. These reports transmitted about them all agree that the first was generous, the second brave, and the third forbearing. However, each separate report would not in itself necessitate coming to that conclusion, nor would it constitute decisive validation. What Qadi Iyad is telling us something very important, and I've mentioned this before, but it's important, or it bears mentioning again. We have a different set of priority of how we accept truth. we look at the person who brings us the information before we look at the information itself. Whereas in the Western paradigm, it's the opposite. We look, if we think as Westerners, we look at the information first and then at the person who brought it. And that's a very fundamental difference between the Islamic paradigm and maybe what we would call the Judeo-Christian paradigm. In other words, if somebody honest told me something, somebody that I trust, that I've lived with, that I've known, that I've, like one of my teachers who, more important to me than my own parents, somebody who I learned all of this stuff from, told me something that was insane. And my teachers have told me some really, really insane things. I accept it, but I also accept maybe I don't understand what they're talking about. But I don't deny the thing that's being said because to me it sounds crazy. Why? Because I trust that person. That is the Islamic paradigm. So when the Quraysh came to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and they said, look, your friend says that last night he went to Jerusalem and then he went up to the heavens and all of this, he's lost it. What did Abu Bakr say? He said, if he said that, then I believe it. That's the Islamic paradigm. We look at the Ray Dalio, the famous investor, he calls it the believability. We look at the believability of the person first. So Abu Bakr said, I believe in something that's even crazier than that he receives revelation every day. So him going to Jerusalem last night, that's no big deal. That's small potatoes. I believe in something even greater than that because I know this person. So when we weigh evidence as Western Muslims and as modern Muslims, sometimes we get confused by that because we also, as Westerners, understand the other paradigm. Because we see people say crazy stuff all the time. And we don't care who says it. We're like, that's just crazy. I don't care if it's the President of the United States or if it's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs or it's, head of this bank. That just sounds crazy. We're used to talking like that. But when it comes to Islamic information, religious information, it's very important that we remember that the order is slightly reversed. So Qadi Iyad, you won't understand what he's saying unless you understand that's kind of like the philosophy behind it. So he's talking about these three figures from pre-Islamic Arabia, and he's saying maybe each individual story, maybe, it's shaky or something like that, but all of those stories together, and everybody talks about them, then we believe in them. Just like we know that there was a person called the Buddha. No one denies that there was somebody called the Buddha. I mean, you'd be insane to say something like that. Or there was a civilization, the Mayan civilization, or the ancient Roman Empire. No one can deny these things are historical facts that have come to us from so many different sources that we understand that they are historical facts. That's what he's saying. So the hadith about the miracles of the Prophet ﷺ, we should understand them in that way. And then he says the second category consists of those things that do not reach the level of certainty, okay, because they do not have that many people that narrated them. They are divided into two kinds. There are those things that are famous and widely known. A number of people relate them, and they are well known to be the people of hadith and the relators and transmitters of the seerah. These include the water flowing from the fingers of the Prophet ﷺ and a little food becoming copious. So those are famous miracle stories, but in and of themselves, they're not at the level of like the moon being cut in half or the Isra and the Ma'raj. But he's saying, even though they're individually transmitted, they come from people that we trust, people that we believe. So therefore we accept them because it only makes sense that the Prophet ﷺ was so amazing. Why not? The water came from his fingers and the food was enough for many people. And by the way, the food enough for many people, I have witnessed that myself. And when you witness things like this, then you understand the power of the miracle. I remember we were in a gathering with one of my teachers, and we were told I was hosting the gathering, we were told to prepare food for, I think 50 or 60 people. So we ordered food for 50 to 60 people, and 250 people showed up. And not only did the food last that every single person ate, but there was food left over after my teacher left. So it's not like, a Disney movie where, all of a sudden, poof, and then the food increased. It wasn't like that, but subhanAllah, the food lasted. I was certain that the food would not last. I mean, the food did not look like it was going to last. But at the end of the evening, everyone had a plate of food in front of them. All the 250 people had a plate of food and there was food left over. So I saw that can happen because there's barakah in the food. And I've also been, on the opposite side where there's a lot of food and, you look like you're overwhelmed by the amount of food and then you can't eat a lot, or you eat a little bit and then you get sick or something like that because there's no barakah in the food. So I have seen stuff like that happen. And that stuff only, confirms your faith. So again, these are reliable transmitters, so we accept them. These include, there are also things that were only known to one or two people. A small number of them related them, and they are not as famous as the other category. But when they are joined to others, they are compatible with them, and together they confirm the miracles as a whole, as we have already stated. Like when the Prophet ﷺ was in the cave with Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu in the Hijrah, and then some of the stories will say a dove came or a bird came and made a nest, or there was a spider that created a spider web on the mouth of the cave. These are not very strong transmissions. But why not? We have no problem accepting them because all of the Sirah authors talk about them anyway. And wasn't the Prophet ﷺ saved? Did the Quraysh find him? No, they didn't find him. So it makes sense. That's what he's saying. We can accept them because of that reason. Many of the signs related from him are definitely known. There is the splitting of the moon, whose occurrence is confirmed by the Quran. اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. It's a verse in the Quran, whole surah. It's called Surah Al-Qamar. There is the splitting of the moon, whose occurrence is confirmed by the Quran and about which there are subsidiary reports, including the reports of the Quraysh, the non-believers who saw it. One should never depart from the literal meaning unless a definite proof is produced. And that's one of our principles of interpretation. We take the prima facie meaning of words unless the prima facie meaning creates some kind of problem, in which case then we have to offer a metaphorical interpretation. Its probability is increased by sound reports from many places, so our resolution to uphold it should not be weakened by the opposition of some stupid weakling devoid of religion, nor should one pay any attention to the stupidity of an innovator who casts doubts into the hearts of weak believers. Nay, rather we throw this in his face and turn our back on his stupidity. This is I would say the same thing, but this is Qadi Iyad saying this. So all of these people that say you have to strip all of these miracles out of the seerah, and you can quote Qadi Iyad, and you can say we turn our back on your stupidity. That's what Qadi Iyad said. You could just say that. It is the same with the story of the water flowing from the fingers of the Prophet ﷺ, which the fuqaha consider the most pure water to ever exist on earth, and the small amount of food becoming larger. Reliable people and numerous individuals related these things from a great number of the companions, because these things happened in public. So therefore, many of the companions saw it, and then they told the people after them, so it becomes many people tell many people, so on and so forth. Among them are the things that have been universally related directly from a group of the greatest companions, such as when many of them were gathered together on the day of the ditch, the battle of Buat, the Umrah of Hudaybiyah, the raid of Tabuk, and other times when the armies of the Muslims were assembled together. So a lot of these miracles happened during battle, on the eve of battle. Many of the stories come from those because those were the most intense moments of the early history of the Muslims. It is not related that any of these companions contradicted any transmitter in what he said, nor did they object to any of the statements attributed to them. And in their case, the silence of those who remain silent is the same as the words of those who spoke, since they were not silent about anything that was untrue, and they were not given to lying sycophancy. This is another principle that we have, that the ulama have an obligation to say when something is wrong. So, if a certain scholar of the past, hadith scholar of the past, was silent about something that is well known and happening, that means it's his approval. Just like the silence of the Prophet ﷺ is a sign of approval. This is one of the sources of our legislation. So that's important to know, because he's saying that all of these stories, people have been talking about all of these stories from the times of the companion. Well, why didn't all of these other ulama say something about them if there's something wrong with them? Rather, they accepted them. Their acceptance of it is therefore a form of approval. Just like and this is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And as a teacher, this is one of the hardest things, because sometimes you don't want to, talk out against something, but you have an obligation to, and this is what we were taught. So when you see something that's wrong, you have to say something. But most of my teachers, who are people that I respect tremendously and are very, 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 very well versed in their fields, very rarely would I see them say anything in public. And many times I would ask them, but so and so. One time I was in a gathering, and there's this fitna amongst some people who argue that the Qibla is not northeast in North America, but it's southeast. And I was with one of my teachers, and I told him so and so that's with us, he believes that the Qibla is south. He says, there's no way he believes that. I said, no, wallahi, he does. So there was a lunch, and they got together and they were talking. And then I saw my teacher, he took like the napkin at the table, he took it out and he took his pen out and he started, I was like, oh, he's going to show him that he's wrong. And then like less than 2 minutes later, the other sheikh got up and left. I was like, what happened? So I was waiting till the lunch and I talked to my sheikh. I said, what happened? He's like, you're right. He actually believes the Qibla is southeast. I was like, okay, yeah, and so what happened? He said, I didn't say anything. I said, why didn't you say anything? I brought this up so you can tell him something. He said, maybe this way of thinking, because this person was a convert, maybe this way of thinking brought him to Islam. And if I undo this way of thinking, maybe he'll end up leaving Islam. So it's just better to leave him. And that was a big lesson for me, because I was going in with ego. Yeah, let's show that he's wrong and that we're right. I was thinking like that. And he was looking at the deeper issue. Well, if this guy actually believes that you can stand here and face Mecca that way and not this way, then we have a deeper problem than his geo coordinates. So I rarely see my teachers criticize. They always love to criticize me. I get my fair share of tough love, but I rarely see them say anything in public, because they always find an excuse for people. So if they can find an excuse for something like that, certainly if there was a lie about the Prophet ﷺ, somebody would have said something in the past. So Qadi Iyad is saying the fact that they were silent allows us to accept it. Do we have time? Okay. Well, I don't want to go further because we're not going to finish. So we'll pause here. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Does anyone have any questions before Maghrib comes in? And now it's removed? Yeah, well, he was generous, and the Prophet ﷺ would acknowledge people, even disbelievers or people in the Jahiliyyah that had good character traits. He used to love makarim al-akhlaq, good character. So if somebody had an aspect of good character, even if he was a disbeliever, he would honor that, praise them. That was that's part of the sunnah.
Or the principles of, thank you. The principles of looking at you were talking about, I guess, like when someone who tells you some information and you look at, I guess the Islamic tradition is to look first at the credibility of the person, or like it's someone that you trust, you take that into account first. In a related way, is there an etiquette or a principle by which we question things? And I mean, when I say question things, question in a way to understand more.
Sure, because we differentiate the person and what is said. So if somebody reliable says something insane, I'll always say, well, this reliable person told me this insane thing that I don't understand. And there are things like that we have that we don't act on, that we don't use. There are traditions that we have that are just so wacky that we're like, it's sound, but I'm not going to act on it. So there are many hadith that different imams of the madhahib don't take as proof. One of the hadith, for example, Ibn Abbas reports in Sahih Muslim that the Prophet ﷺ used to combine his prayers in Medina, Dhuhr and Asr, and Maghrib and Isha, without traveling. This is a sound hadith. None of the madhahib take this hadith except the Shafi'i madhab. Because the other A'immah, they're like, this doesn't make any sense. We don't deny that it's a sound hadith, but it's peculiar. So you can critique. But the fact that we don't understand it doesn't make us negate the whole thing altogether. That's my point. But no, we can critique for sure. Because sometimes we don't understand it. Or you're silent or you don't take it. Like a lot of the hadith about the Dajjal, one day will be like 40 days. No one really understood what those hadith meant until we experienced northern latitudes in which there was no sunlight or there was no sunset. Then we're like, oh, we have evidence in that hadith of how to pray in those situations. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina wa Mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.